There are exactly 3 universal constants in this galaxy. Tax audits are painful no matter what planet you're from, politicians lie in at least 7 dimensions, and the sign outside the Grand Galactic Council Archive will always read, "No human children permitted within 100 kilometers of this facility." I should know. I'm the poor sap who has to polish the damn thing every morning. My name's Jack Donovan, Senior Archivist, Human Division, of the largest information repository in the known universe. It's a fancy title that basically means I'm the only human insane enough to spend my career organizing 10 billion years of cosmic knowledge while being paid less than what a Regelian sewer technician makes in tips. The archive itself is a Marvel, a moon-sized installation carved into an asteroid at the galaxy's central hub, containing everything from the recipe for genuine Aldebaran cocoa, tastes like a chocolate-covered supernova, to the complete recorded history of species so ancient they went extinct before Earth had finished cooking off its primordial soup. Donovan, your biometric signature indicates elevated cortisol levels again. Need I remind you that your mandatory relaxation period is scheduled for next fiscal quarter? The voice belonged to my supervisor, Sixtal, a 12-limbed insectoid with the personality of a sentient spreadsheet. I'm fine. 6. Just contemplating the absurdity of our no human children policy for the 4,362nd time, I replied, watching as the morning light caught the ridiculous holographic warning sign that hovered at the archive entrance. Sixtal's mandibles clicked in what I recognized as their species equivalent of exasperation. That regulation exists for profoundly good reasons. Archivist Donovan. Right. The infamous incident, which supposedly happened before I was born, yet nobody will actually explain it to me. Very convincing. The Council has classified all details at security level Omega-9, which is bureaucrat speak for we made this up, but don't want to admit it's ridiculous. Sixtal's compound eyes flashed crimson, never a good sign. May I remind you that your species has only been part of the Galactic Council for 87 years? A mere eye blink. There are laundry cycles on Betelgeuse that take longer. I raised my hands in surrender. Fine, fine. No human kids allowed. I get it. I just think. Attention all staff. The archive's AI chimed in, interrupting my surely brilliant critique. The educational tour group from the Diplomatic Academy of Proxima Centauri arriving at main reception in 5 minutes. All visitors are classified as juvenile non-humans. Appropriate protocols are in effect. Sixtal's upper limbs twitched excitedly. Ah, the annual field trip. Come along, Donovan. As our token human, you're required for the cultural exchange portion. I sighed and followed my boss toward the entrance hall, silently rehearsing my human's 101 speech that I'd given so many times I could recite it in my sleep. At least alien kids were generally well-behaved, not like human children with their chaos and sticky fingers and inconvenient questions. The Diplomatic Academy students had already arrived by the time we reached the grand entrance hall, 30 juveniles of various species arranged in perfect formation. Their teacher, a floating gas cloud named Professor Nebulon, who swore that was his real name and not something he made up to sound impressive, wafted over to us. Senior Archivists, what an honor to have you personally greet my students. They've been learning all about information preservation techniques and cultural heritage safeguarding. The students, ranging from tiny fuzzy beings to towering crystalline structures, chorused a perfectly synchronized greeting in 17 different languages. Sixtal began the formal welcome, and I scanned the group, mentally counting heads to ensure our security protocols were adequate. 29, 30, 31. Wait. My gaze zeroed in on a small figure in the back row, trying desperately to hide behind a gelatinous blob student. A figure with distinctly human features, unruly red hair, and a grin that immediately spelled trouble. A human child. In the archive. Approximately 99 kilometers and change inside the Forbidden Zone. And just like that, my relatively peaceful day working at the greatest knowledge repository in the galaxy transformed into what would soon be known as the second incident. 6, I whispered urgently, nudging my supervisor's chitinous exoskeleton. We have a situation. Not now, Donovan. I'm explaining the critical importance of our chronological quarantine procedures to these impressionable minds. There's a human child in the group. I've seen many reactions in my years at the archive. Diplomats fainting when learning their species' embarrassing evolutionary origins, scholars weeping at the beauty of ancient texts. Even the time a Venusian historian discovered their most sacred religious document was actually a takeout menu. But I'd never seen a 12-limbed insectoid perform what could only be described as a spontaneous anti-gravity jazz dance. Six Tau leapt nearly 3 meters into the air, all appendages flailing, antennae standing so rigid they could have picked up signals from the next galaxy over. Security Protocol Omega. Human juvenile detected. This is not a drill. The archive's alarm system activated instantly, but rather than the blaring klaxons one might expect, the designers had opted for something far more civilized, a soothing voice gently suggesting that everyone remain calm while contemplating the inevitable heat death of the universe, which renders all current emergencies relatively insignificant. Professor Nebulon expanded in distress to nearly twice his size. Impossible. My roster clearly indicates 30 Proximan diplomatic students. No humans. The human child, a girl of perhaps 10 Earth years, stepped forward with the unapologetic confidence only human children possess. Hi. I'm Mia. This place is awesome. Do you really have the brain of the last draconian emperor in a jar? Can I see it? Does it still think thoughts? Can it dream? Six Tau was rapidly turning from their normal scholarly beige to a concerning shade of purple. How did you get here? The transport ships have biometric scanners specifically calibrated to detect human juveniles. Mia shrugged. I hid in my friend Blorg's supplemental respiratory chamber. She pointed to the gelatinous blob student, who had the decency to look embarrassed, rippling in what translated to sheepish apology. By now, a security team had arrived, 4 cerulean guards, the archive's elite protection force, each holding what looked like fancy butterfly nets, specifically designed for capturing intruders without damaging rare manuscripts in the process. Stand aside, civilian archivists, announced their commander, a stern-faced blue humanoid with glowing circuitry patterns across her skin. I am Chief Security Officer Zandrax. No, this breach falls under my jurisdiction. I stepped in front of Mia. Hold on. She's just a kid who's stowed away on a field trip. Let's not overreact. Zandrax's circuits flashed dangerously. Overreact? Human archivist, I don't believe you comprehend the severity of this situation. The last time a human child entered these premises, 3 entire wings had to be rebuilt, and the council's insurance premiums tripled. I'm sure we can handle one curious girl, I insisted. Six Tau had finally regained their composure enough to chitter anxiously. Donovan, regulations are clear. The child must be removed immediately and placed in quarantine. Quarantine? I exclaimed. She's not carrying a disease. Curiosity is the most infectious human trait, Zandrax replied coldly. And in children, it reaches pandemic levels. Throughout this exchange, Professor Nebulon had been frantically messaging the Diplomatic Academy, his gaseous form vibrating with distress. The child's parents are en route, he announced, distinguished diplomats from Earth's unified embassy. They send their profound apologies and will arrive in approximately 3 hours. 3 hours? Six Tau's antennae drooped in horror. In the damage that could occur in 3 hours. I propose a simple solution, I said reasonably. I'll personally supervise Mia until her parents arrive. As a human, I'm best equipped to understand and manage her behavior. Mia beamed up at me. Can we see the restricted sections? I heard you have a book that reads your mind instead of you reading it. Zandrax's circuits pulsed with what I recognized as the cerulean equivalent of a suspicious glare. This is highly irregular. Protocol demands immediate removal. With all due respect, Chief Zandrax, I countered, physically removing her would mean a 3-hour shuttle journey beyond the 100-kilometer boundary. That's 3 more hours she'll be in proximity to the archive than if we simply wait for her parents here. Logic, as always in bureaucratic settings, created an impasse of magnificent proportions. The security team, the professor, and my supervisor all froze in the classic pose of officials confronted with a situation not covered in their extensive manuals. Into this administrative standoff strutted the perfect embodiment of regulatory fervor, Assistant Director Krok, a bipedal reptilian with more medals pinned to his chest than most militaries possessed in their entire inventory. Each one, as he liked to remind everyone, represented a successfully implemented policy. "What seems to be the disturbance?" he asked, his voice dripping with the special condescension reserved for those who have memorized every regulation in existence. "A human child has infiltrated the archive, sir," reported Zandrax. Krok's scales shifted from professional green to alarmed orange. His gaze fell upon Mia, who waved cheerfully. "Hi, Mr. Lizard. Your medals are super shiny." Krok's tail went rigid. "Containment protocols must be implemented immediately. I will personally oversee this operation." "Sir," I interjected, "I've already volunteered to." "Donovan," Krok cut me off, "your species bias makes you unsuitable for this task. I will handle this with the appropriate detachment and procedural rigor." As if on cue, Mia's attention had already wandered. Before anyone could react, she darted past the security team with the surprising speed that human children somehow only activate when heading toward trouble. "Look, a floating book," she exclaimed, running toward an ancient levitating manuscript that was part of the entrance hall display. "Stop her," Krok commanded. "That's a 13-billion-year-old account of the first sentient thought in our galaxy." But it was too late. As Mia reached for the manuscript, the display's protective field activated as designed. What wasn't designed was Mia's uniquely human reaction, giggling at the tickling sensation of the field and jumping back, directly into a cart of newly delivered artifacts waiting to be catalogued. The cart tipped, sending its contents scattering across the polished floor. And in the ensuing chaos of guards and officials lunging to protect priceless relics, none of us noticed Mia quietly slipped through an authorized personnel door that had opened automatically for a flustered archivist carrying too many scrolls to notice her. By the time order was restored and treasures secured, the human child had vanished into the labyrinthine depths of the greatest repository of knowledge in the galaxy. Krok turned to me, his scales now a furious crimson. "Congratulations, Donovan. You've just become personally responsible for finding that child before she can trigger the second incident." Ever tried finding a single human child in a facility the size of a small moon? It's like searching for a specific hydrogen atom in an ocean. Except the hydrogen atom is actively trying not to be found and has an unhealthy obsession with pushing buttons labeled "Do Not Push." The archive has over 18,000 sections across 42 levels, 6 tal-fretted, their limbs working frantically at a holographic tracking interface. And that's just the catalogued areas. "What do you mean?" "Just the catalogued areas," I demanded. "There." Krok cleared his throat. "The archive has been collecting knowledge for over 50,000 years, Donovan. Even with our advanced systems, there are spaces that have fallen off the official maps." That was news to me, and I'd worked here for 12 years. "So you're telling me there are literal uncharted sections in the greatest information repository in the galaxy?" "Knowledge has a way of expanding beyond containment," Six Tal explained nervously. Krok was already organizing the search party, dividing the security team into groups. "We'll begin with the most dangerous sections first." "Dangerous?" I thought this was a library, I protested. "Knowledge is the most dangerous force in the universe, Archivist Donovan," Krok replied gravely. "Why do you think we have security measures that would make most military installations look like playground equipment?" The search commenced with military precision, with me reluctantly paired with Krok as we headed toward the experimental physics wing. The hallways of the archive shifted from the grand, visitor-friendly architecture of the entrance to the more utilitarian corridors of the working sections. Hovering lights illuminated our path, and the walls themselves contained embedded knowledge subtle patterns that, when observed by certain species, can invade entire encyclopedias of information directly to the mind. "The child couldn't have gone far," Krok muttered, consulting his tracker. "Human juveniles have limited stamina and attention spans. I snorted. Clearly you haven't spent much time around human children. They're like perpetual motion machines fueled by curiosity and sugar. Your species' reproductive strategy remains baffling, Krok replied. You're creating miniature versions of yourselves with all your worst traits amplified and none of the restraint. We passed through a security checkpoint where Krok's impressive collection of credentials granted us immediate access. Beyond it lay the theoretical concepts division, where ideas too dangerous or improbable for practical application were stored. Be extremely cautious here, Krok warned. Some of these concepts can infect organic minds merely through proximity. Infect? You mean like bad ideas can literally become contagious? Precisely. Why do you think certain fashion trends spread so rapidly? Before I could process that disturbing implication, we heard a sound that sent chills down my spine, the unmistakable laughter of a delighted human child. We rounded a corner to find Mia standing before a shimmering display cabinet containing what appeared to be a small silver sphere. Around her, the archive's defensive systems had activated spectral librarians, holographic constructs designed to gently deter unauthorized visitors. But instead of being deterred, Mia was playing an impromptu game of tag with them. "You can't catch me," she giggled, ducking under the ghostly arm of a particularly stern-looking holographic entity. "Archive security breach in Section 7G," intoned the spectral librarian in a whisper that somehow conveyed more menace than a shout. "Unauthorized access to conceptual hazards." Krok immediately began reciting his authorization codes, while I approached Mia carefully. "Hey there," I called softly. "Having fun?" Mia spun toward me, eyes bright with excitement. "This place is amazing. Did you know there's a room where gravity works sideways? And I found a book that told me jokes nobody's invented yet." "That's great. But your parents are worried, and we really need to get you back to the entrance hall." "But I haven't seen everything yet. There's a whole section on extinct space creatures, and somebody told me you have actual dinosaur DNA from Earth." Her enthusiasm was as endearing as it was terrifying in this context. "Who told you about the dinosaur DNA?" Krok demanded, finally managing to deactivate the spectral librarians. "The floating squid guy in the room with all the bubbles," Mia replied nonchalantly. Krok and I exchanged alarmed glances. "There are no staff members matching that description," he hissed. "Oh, he wasn't staff," Mia explained cheerfully. "He said he's been lost in here for 20 years but doesn't mind because the archive feeds him interesting facts." That revelation set off another round of security protocols, with Krok frantically reporting a possible second intruder. Meanwhile, I took another step toward Mia, almost within grabbing distance. "What's that shiny ball thing?" she asked, pointing to the silver sphere in the display. "Nothing important," I lied smoothly. "Say, I bet you'd love to see our Earth collection. We have original copies of every book ever printed." For a moment I thought I had her. But then a soft chime sounded, and every information panel in the vicinity lit up with a security alert. "Attention, archive defense systems detecting unauthorized activation in prohibited Section 12X. Initiating containment protocols." Krok's scales paled to an alarming white. "Section 12X? That's impossible. It requires council-level clearance even to know it exists." "What's in Section 12X?" I asked. "If I told you, I'd have to mind-wipe you afterward," Krok replied, deadly serious. Mia took advantage of our distraction to dart past us, disappearing through a maintenance hatch neither of us had noticed until she pulled it open. "How did she see that?" Krok demanded. "That access point is phase-shifted to be invisible to most species." "Human children," I explained, already squeezing through the hatch after her, have a supernatural ability to find exactly what they're not supposed to find. The maintenance tunnel beyond was cramped for adults but perfect for a child-sized explorer. I could hear Mia's footsteps and excited commentary echoing ahead as she discovered new wonders. Behind me, Krok was attempting to follow while maintaining his dignity, a losing battle that involved much grunting and the occasional ping of a medal hitting the tunnel wall. "This is most irregular," he complained. "No security drill ever covered pursuit through the maintenance system. Welcome to dealing with human children." I called back, where common sense goes to die and the impossible becomes routine. We emerged into what appeared to be a massive storage vault, with artifacts floating in stasis fields arranged in endless rows reaching up to a ceiling too high to perceive. Artifacts from civilizations so ancient they predated the concept of civilization itself. And in the center of it all stood Mia, her hand hovering dangerously close to a pulsating crystalline structure that definitely qualified as do not touch material. Don't move. Krok and I shouted simultaneously. Mia looked up, startled, and in that startled moment, her finger brushed against the crystal. There's a peculiar moment of tranquility that occurs immediately after a catastrophe begins, but before your brain processes that you're doomed. It's nature's way of giving you one last peaceful second before everything goes spectacularly wrong. The crystal Mia touched flared with blinding light, then went completely dark. For that peaceful second, I thought perhaps nothing would happen after all. Then every alarm in the archive activated simultaneously. Security breach detected. Initiating archive lockdown. All personnel proceed to emergency stations. This is not a drill. The massive doors at every exit slammed shut with the finality of a tax authority audit notice. Overhead, heavy shield barriers descended, dividing the vault into containment sections. One nearly crushed Krok, who dove forward with surprising agility for someone wearing enough medals to set off metal detectors 3 galaxies away. "What did I do?" Mia asked, wide-eyed, backing away from the crystal. "You activated an ancient defensive system," Krok hissed, scales fluctuating between panic white and fury red. "That crystal is a control node for the Archive's original security network installed before most species in this section of the galaxy had discovered fire." I ran a hand through my hair, a human stress response that always bewildered my alien colleagues. "Okay, let's not panic. The Archive has redundant safety systems. The modern security network will override." "It can't," Krok interrupted. "The ancient system operates on completely different principles. It's like trying to hack a quantum computer with an abacus." "That doesn't make sense. Why maintain an outdated security system that can override modern protocols?" Krok straightened, adjusting his medals. "Because, Donovan, the ancients built things to last. Their technology doesn't degrade, doesn't become obsolete. It simply is. The Council decided it was safer to work around it than attempt to dismantle it." Mia tugged at my sleeve. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break the space library." Despite the crisis, I couldn't help but smile at her terminology. "It's not your fault. Places like this should be designed with curious fingers in mind." "Actually," Krok interjected, "it precisely is her fault, and yours for failing to prevent it." I turned to face the bureaucrat, my patience finally evaporating. "Listen, Scaleface. We can play the blame game after we fix this mess. Right now, we need to work together or we're all going to end up as cautionary exhibits in whatever replaces this place." Krok's tail swished in agitation, but he nodded curtly. "A temporary alliance may be prudent under these extreme circumstances." "Great. Now, what exactly are we dealing with?" "The ancient security system operates on a simple principle. It assumes any unrecognized entity is a threat and takes increasingly aggressive action to neutralize it." "Define aggressive," I asked, already dreading the answer. "The Archive itself becomes a defense mechanism. Knowledge is weaponized." As if to illustrate his point, the floating artifacts around us began to pulse with energy. From one, a beam of light projected what appeared to be advanced mathematical equations directly into the air before us, equations that made my eyes water and my brain itch just by looking at them. "Don't stare directly at them." Krok yanked me aside. "Those are weaponized theorems. They can rewrite neural pathways." Mia had already covered her eyes, displaying the survival instinct that somehow coexists with the suicidal curiosity of human children. "We need to get to a control terminal," Krok said, leading us toward a door on the far side of the vault. "If we can access the mainframe, there might be override protocols." As we navigated through the increasingly hostile archive, Krok maintained a running commentary on the security measures triggering around us, partly, I suspected, to maintain his own calm. The ancient system has been dormant for millennia, he explained as we ducked under a hovering text that apparently contained metic hazards. It was designed to protect knowledge from species deemed intellectually unprepared. And who decides what intellectually unprepared means? I asked, helping Mia over a section of floor that had transformed into what appeared to be a logic puzzle. The system itself, Krok replied grimly. It evaluates threats based on behavior patterns and human children, with their random exploration and persistent need to touch everything, are basically its worst nightmare, I finished. Precisely why the 100-kilometer rule exists. We reached a terminal junction where multiple corridors intersected. The walls here were covered with shifting symbols, the archive's universal language interface adapting to communicate with us. It's asking for authentication, Krok said, studying the patterns. He placed his palm against a scanner, reciting his credentials. The symbols flashed red. Access denied, unauthorized biological entity detected. It doesn't recognize modern security clearances. I realized the ancient system predates the council. Krok's professional demeanor finally cracked. Then we're trapped until the system decides we're not threats which could take centuries of evaluation. Mia, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. What if we answer its questions? We both turned to her. What questions? I asked. She pointed to a section of wall where symbols were forming into distinct patterns. It's been asking me things. About why I'm here and what I want to learn. Krok and I exchanged stunned looks. The symbols meant nothing to either of us, just abstract shapes. You can read that? Krok demanded. Kind of. It's like it's talking directly into my head. Mia approached the wall, placing her small hand against it. It's asking if we want to harm the knowledge here. Tell it absolutely not, I urged. We're here to protect and preserve information. Mia nodded, her face screwed up in concentration. The symbols swirled, reformed, then gradually shifted from red to a cautious yellow. I think it believes me, she said. But it wants proof of our intentions. This is unprecedented, Krok whispered. The ancient system never communicates directly with visitors. It merely judges and acts. An uncomfortable thought occurred to me. When exactly did the no human children rule get implemented? Krok's scales rippled thoughtfully. Approximately 50 Earth years ago, after what the official record calls the incident. And what exactly happened during this incident? The details are classified, but the outcome was the immediate ban of human children from archive premises. I looked at Mia, who was still communing with the ancient system, the symbols around her shifting more rapidly now. What if the incident wasn't a disaster, but a discovery? What if they found out that human children can communicate with the ancient system? That's preposterous, Krok scoffed, but his tone lacked conviction. Why would the council ban the very beings who could interface with the original architecture? Because bureaucrats hate anything they can't control, I replied, and what's less controllable than human children? As we debated, the symbols surrounding Mia had shifted to a calm blue. The hostile defense measures throughout the vault powered down. I told it we're friends, Mia announced proudly, and that I just wanted to learn stuff. It says it's been lonely. Lonely. Krok repeated incredulously. It's a security system. The ancients built their technology differently. I reminded him. Maybe it's semi-sentient. Maybe it just wants visitors who approach it with genuine curiosity rather than administrative authority. Krok's tail swished in what I now recognized as his thinking gesture. This changes everything. If human children can communicate with the ancient systems, then the ban makes perfect sense, I concluded. The council wouldn't want anyone accessing the archive's core functions except through official channels. Mia interrupted our revelation. It says there's a problem in some place called Section 12X. Something about containment failure imminent. Krok's scales went death white. We need to get there immediately. If what I think is happening is actually happening, The entire archive could be compromised. What's in Section 12X? I demanded. Krok hesitated, then apparently decided that crisis overrode classification. The conceptual viruses. Ideas so dangerous they can spread autonomously if not properly contained. Like what? Like the concept that reality itself might be optional. If you've never sprinted through an ancient knowledge repository while cosmic secrets try to download themselves directly into your brain, I don't recommend adding it to your bucket list, especially when you're following a bureaucrat having an existential crisis while trying to keep a human child from accidentally making reality optional. Section 12X was never meant to be accessed by anyone below council level. Well, Krok explained breathlessly as we raced through corridors that seemed to be actively rearranging themselves around us. It contains concepts that were quarantined for good reason. Such as? I prompted, keeping a firm grip on Mia's hand. The mathematical proof that probability is a flawed concept. The philosophical treatise demonstrating that consciousness may be transmissible like a virus. The collected evidence suggesting reality itself might be a consensus hallucination that can be opted out of with sufficient conviction. Those don't sound so bad, Mia chimed in. The last civilization that rediscovered the opt-out theorem vanished overnight, Krok replied grimly. All billion of them simply decided reality was inconvenient and collectively imagined themselves elsewhere. Their planet remains physically intact but entirely devoid of sentient life. Okay, that's moderately concerning, I admitted. We reached a massive vault door marked with warning symbols from at least 50 different civilizations, all essentially communicating some variation of seriously, "Don't open this door. We mean it this time." The door was ajar. A pulsing light emanated from within, casting long shadows down the corridor. The air itself seemed to waver, as if reality was already becoming questionable in the vicinity. The ancient security system must have unsealed it when it activated, Krok whispered. It wouldn't recognize the danger. It predates these concepts being classified as hazardous. I knelt down to Mia's level. Listen carefully. We need to reseal this vault. But what's inside can literally change how you think. I need you to stay here and communicate with the ancient system. She finished, surprisingly serious for a child who had been treating the archive like the galaxy's most interesting playground just minutes earlier. I can ask it to help us. Krok looked skeptical. The ancient system is security-focused. It may not understand the nature of conceptual containment. It's worth trying, I insisted. Mia, stay at this terminal and see if you can explain the situation. We're going in to manually activate the emergency containment protocols. Mia nodded solemnly, placing her hand against the wall interface where symbols immediately began forming in response to her presence. Krok and I approached the vault entrance, the light growing more intense with each step. Cover your ears and recite something familiar, Krok instructed. Mathematical formulas, poetry, religious texts, anything to anchor your conscious mind against conceptual intrusion. Will that actually work? Probably not, but it makes the experience slightly less terrifying. With that reassuring thought, we stepped through the doorway into Section 12X. The interior was both more and less than I expected. No eldritch horrors or cosmic monstrosities, just a circular chamber with a central pillar surrounded by what appeared to be ordinary information storage units. But the air itself seemed charged with something beyond mere energy potentiality, perhaps. The sense that thoughts here had weight and substance. Don't look directly at any of the displays, Krok warned, his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. Head straight for the central pillar. The manual override should be there. We inched forward, fighting against a growing sensation that the very concept of forward was becoming increasingly arbitrary. Colors seemed to have flavors. Sounds acquired texture. I found myself contemplating whether there was a useful pronoun or an outdated constraint on multidimensional consciousness. Krok wasn't faring much better. His scales were cycling through colors I'm pretty sure didn't exist in normal spacetime. The override, I reminded him, focusing on the concrete goal rather than the increasingly abstract nature of existence around us. Yes. Override. Krok reached the central pillar first, his training apparently providing some resistance against conceptual contamination. He began manipulating controls that seemed to shift between physical switches and pure thought interfaces. "We need to activate the purge sequence," he muttered, "clear the air of free-floating concepts and reseal the containment barriers." "Will that reverse any exposure we've experienced?" I asked, becoming uncomfortably aware that I was now considering whether numerals were more a form of poetry than mathematics. Partially. Complete decontamination will require medical intervention afterward. A sudden tremor shook the chamber. The light from the storage units intensified, and I could feel ideas pressing against my consciousness like ocean waves against a failing dam. "Something's accelerating the conceptual decay," Krok hissed. "The containment fields are collapsing faster than they should be." Outside in the corridor, we heard Mia's voice raised in what sounded like argument. The ancient system's response manifested as pulses of light and symbol patterns along the walls. "It doesn't understand," she called to us. "It thinks dangerous knowledge should be accessible to those who seek it. That's what it was programmed for." And there was our fundamental problem, two security systems with completely opposing philosophies. The ancient system designed to preserve and share knowledge, the modern council protocols designed to restrict and control it. We need to convince it that some knowledge requires protection not from people, but for people, I shouted back, fighting against the growing certainty that language itself was merely a quaint local custom rather than a universal necessity. "The override isn't responding," Krok reported, his voice strained. "The ancient system is blocking our commands." Another tremor, stronger this time. One of the storage units cracked, releasing a visible wave of something, but that wasn't quite light or energy but made me temporarily forget that three-dimensional space was supposed to be a constant. "The containment is failing," Krok announced, his bureaucratic composure finally shattering completely. "When it does, every consciousness within 50 parsecs will be exposed to concepts they're evolutionarily unprepared to process." Including the ancient system itself, I realized. "Tell it it's in danger too. These concepts evolved after it was created. It has no defenses against them." Through the doorway, I could see Mia pressing both hands against the wall interface now. Her face scrunched in concentration as she mentally shouted at a security system older than most existing civilizations. The chamber trembled again, and the central pillar began to emit a high-pitched tone that somehow tasted purple. "We have minutes at most," Krok said grimly. I looked around the chamber, fighting to maintain coherent thought as reality became increasingly subjective. There must be an emergency destruct sequence, something that sacrifices this section to save the rest of the archive. There is, but it requires council-level authorization that I don't possess. What about the ancient system? Could it authorize it? Krok's eyes widened with the desperation of a bureaucrat forced to consider procedural heresy. Technically, yes, its authority predates the council structure, but convincing it to destroy knowledge it's programmed to protect. Yeah. I called out. "We need the ancient system to authorize emergency destruction of this section. Tell it these concepts are corrupting its own programming." Through the haze of conceptual contamination, I saw Mia's small figure still communicating urgently with the wall interface. The symbols flowing around her hands had taken on a frantic, almost chaotic pattern. "It's listening," she shouted back. "But it wants proof that the knowledge is harmful rather than simply challenging." Krok and I exchanged glances. How do you prove to an ancient AI that some thoughts are too dangerous to think? "Show it what's happening to us," I suggested. "Our neural patterns must be visibly degrading." Krok nodded, staggering toward the door as another storage unit cracked. "Ancient One," he called out formally, his voice carrying the weight of official protocol despite our desperate situation. "I submit myself as evidence. Scan my neural pathways and compare to baseline archives." The walls pulsed with light, extending tendrils of illumination that surrounded Krok's head. He grimaced but stood firm as the ancient system conducted its analysis. I felt the floor beneath us shift, not physically but conceptually, as if the very idea of floor was becoming negotiable. "It's working," Mia called. It's detecting pattern corruption in both of you. Wait, her voice faltered. What's happening? I called back, fighting the increasingly compelling notion that communication itself might be unnecessary since consciousness was possibly just one big shared illusion anyway. It's decided to quarantine you both instead of destroying the section, Mia replied, her voice rising with panic. It thinks you can be saved. That's not good enough, Krok murmured, his scales now shifting through dimensions rather than merely colors. The conceptual contamination has gone airborne. The physical barriers won't contain it. I leaned against the central pillar, forcing my thoughts into some semblance of order. Ancient One. Ancient One. I addressed the system directly. Your primary directive is knowledge preservation, yes? These concepts, once released, will destroy the minds capable of understanding knowledge. No more learners means knowledge itself becomes meaningless. The chamber went still for a moment. The lights dimmed, then surged again with renewed intensity. It's considering, Mia translated. It's running simulations. The final storage unit cracked. I felt something fundamental in my understanding of reality begin to slip, like a rug being pulled from beneath my feet. We're out of time, Krok warned. Ancient One. I shouted, abandoning protocol entirely. Knowledge without minds to comprehend it is just data. Save the minds so knowledge can continue. The chamber plunged into sudden darkness. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then, a new light, steady, controlled, purposeful, emanated from the walls. And emergency protocol activated, announced a voice that somehow managed to sound both ancient and newly awakened. A conceptual containment breach detected. Section isolation commencing. Heavy barriers slammed down around the chamber. The air itself seemed to solidify, trapping the escaped concepts before they could spread further. A purge sequence initiated. The voice continued. Evacuation required. That's our cue, I gasped, grabbing Krok's arm and pulling him toward the exit. A run. We stumbled out of the chamber, just as the vault door began to swing closed. Mia was waiting, her eyes wide with relief and residual fear. The ancient system is going to create a localized reality bubble, she explained rapidly. It's going to fold this section into its own pocket dimension where the concepts can't escape. How do you know that? Krok asked, his voice still distorted by his conceptual exposure. It told me, Mia replied simply. It said I asked good questions. The corridor began to vibrate as reality itself was being manipulated around Section 12X. We ran, not stopping until we reached what felt like a safe distance. When we finally paused to catch our breath, Krok's scales had settled back into their normal coloration, and I found I could once again comprehend three-dimensional space without philosophical crisis. We'll still need decontamination, Krok noted, his bureaucratic demeanor reasserting itself, and there will be paperwork. So much paperwork. But the archive is safe, I confirmed. Krok nodded solemnly. Thanks to quick thinking and a child who apparently has a gift for communicating with ancient security systems. Mia beamed. It said I could visit again sometime, once the emergency is over. I ruffled her hair affectionately. Let's get through one crisis at a time, shall we? Behind us, where Section 12X had been, there was now only a smooth wall bearing a simple warning in the ancient script, conceptual hazard contained, do not attempt recovery. Some knowledge, it seemed, was better left forgotten even in the greatest library in the galaxy. 3 days of decontamination protocols gave me entirely too much time to contemplate my life choices. Specifically, how Professional Archive Guide had somehow expanded to include conceptual contamination survivor on my resume. The medical wing of the archive was surprisingly comprehensive apparently. Knowledge-related injuries were common enough to warrant specialized treatment facilities. The walls were a soothing shade of blue that I strongly suspected had been psychologically calibrated to counter the effects of reality-bending concept exposure. A neural pattern stabilizing nicely, announced Dr. Thelium, a gaseous entity contained in an elaborate medical exosuit. The doctor's voice emerged from a speaker as they examined holographic displays of my brain activity. Another day of observation, and you should be cleared for discharge. And the side effects? I asked, still occasionally experiencing moments where colors seemed unnecessarily limited to the visible spectrum. Transient. Though you may find yourself occasionally solving mathematical equations in your sleep for the next few months. Nothing harmful, just your brain processing and compartmentalizing the exposure. In the adjacent recovery pod, Krok was undergoing a more intensive treatment regimen. His reptilian physiology had reacted differently to the conceptual contamination, resulting in what the medical staff euphemistically called dimensional echo. Essentially, that parts of him occasionally slipped slightly out of phase with standard reality. And Krok? I nodded toward my unlikely companion. Administrator Krok will recover fully, Dr. Thelem assured me. The tentacles of gas curling within their containment suit in what I'd learned was a gesture of professional confidence. His species has remarkable neural plasticity. The Council has already commended his actions during the crisis. I raised an eyebrow. Really? The Council moved that quickly on anything? When it involves a near-catastrophic breach of Section 12X? Yes. Even bureaucracy has its limits of caution. I leaned back against the medical pod, staring at the ceiling. And what about the child? Mia. Unaffected, remarkably. Her neural scans show no signs of conceptual contamination. The ancient system apparently shielded her completely during communications. That raised questions I wasn't sure I wanted to contemplate about the relationship between Mia and the Archive's original security system. The questions that would undoubtedly be explored in exhaustive detail by the Council's research division in the coming months. A soft chime indicated a visitor, and the door to the recovery area slid open to reveal Professor Abinol, Mia's guardian. The professor's typically disheveled appearance had achieved new heights of academic chaos, suggesting they hadn't slept properly since the incident. "They told me you were awake," Abinol said, approaching my pod with visible relief. "I'd been wanting to thank you properly." I waved away the gratitude. "I think your ward did most of the saving. I just ran around panicking in a slightly more productive way than average." Nevertheless, Abinol placed a small device on the table beside me. "The Council has granted you full research privileges for life. It's the least they could do after what happened." I blinked in surprise. Full research privileges were typically reserved for scholars who had dedicated decades to their fields. That's unexpectedly generous of them. Self-interest, Krok's voice rasped from the neighboring pod. He had apparently been listening to our conversation. "They're hoping you'll be too busy researching to file a formal complaint about security protocols." Abinol's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. Administrator Krok's cynicism is not entirely unfounded. But the recognition is genuine. Few visitors to the archive have faced what you did and emerged with their sanity intact. "Where is Mia now?" I asked, suddenly realizing the child wasn't with her guardian. "Currently receiving an impromptu education from the archive's ancient system," Abinol replied, a mixture of pride and concern evident in their voice. "Under strict supervision, I assure you. The Council is processing the implications of her apparent affinity for the original security protocols." "By processing, the professor means they're having an institutional meltdown," Krok interjected, managing to sound both amused and annoyed despite his weakened state. "A human child who can communicate with pre-council systems bypasses about 70 different security paradigms." I couldn't help but smile at the mental image of the Council's emergency session. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Abinol looked thoughtful. "Now we adapt. The crisis revealed vulnerabilities in the archive's approach to knowledge containment. The ancient system and our modern protocols need to find a balance. And Mia gets special lessons from a sentient library," I added. "And with extreme restrictions on curriculum." Krok emphasized from his pod, the bureaucrat in him clearly unable to let that point slide. Dr. Thelem, who had been quietly monitoring our vital signs during this exchange, made the gaseous equivalent of a throat-clearing sound. "Your visitors have 10 more minutes before mandatory rest period," they announced. Abinol nodded in acknowledgement. "Before I go, Mia wanted me to give you something." They produced a small crystal cube from their pocket, placing it carefully beside the council credentials. She made it yesterday. The cube glowed softly when I touched it, projecting a simple image of what appeared to be Mia Krok and myself rendered in a child's artistic style. Above the figures, glowing text read, Archive Adventure Team. She's convinced this won't be the last crisis the Archive faces, Abinol explained, and equally convinced that you'll both be involved when the next one comes. Krok made a sound that might have been a groan or a laugh. It was hard to tell with his voice still distorted by treatment. The Archive has stood for millennia without catastrophe, and now suddenly we have a team for inevitable crises. The universe does seem to have a peculiar sense of timing, I agreed, turning the crystal cube in my hand and watching the light play through it. But I think I'd prefer a bit of boredom for the foreseeable future. Standard tours, regular scholars, absolutely no reality-bending concepts. As if triggered by my words, the recovery room's alert system gave a soft ping. A notification appeared on the wall display. Attention, anomalous energy signature detected in Archive Section 8N. Investigation pending. The three of us stared at the notification in silence. I believe, Abinol said slowly, that the ancient system has a concept your Earth philosophers once called irony. Krok's scales briefly flashed a color pattern that I now recognized as the reptilian equivalent of resigned exasperation. Section 8M. The Temporal Paradox Collection. Of course it is. I let my head fall back against the medical pod's cushioning with a soft thud. Just once, I muttered to the universe at large, I'd like to work somewhere where the metaphysical nature of reality isn't constantly in question. The crystal cube in my hand pulsed brightly in response, as if laughing at the very notion. And in the greatest library in the galaxy, it seemed, knowledge would always find a way to be troublesome, and adventures, whether wanted or not, would inevitably follow.